Dear colleagues, we are happy to present the study Hieroglyphic Semiotics of the Emoji Science in the Digital Communication, performed by an assembled group of researchers from Boris Grinchenko Kyiv University and Kryvyi Rih State Pedagogical University. The study is a parcel of a series of studies carried out by the group of authors on the structural and systemic specifics of the artificial language of emoji. In this study, the problem is considered through the prism of two linguistic dimensions, the natural language and the artificial language. This approach is related to the semiotic nature of languages, the hieroglyphic languages, the iconicity, the structure of a sign that is in nature elatic, that is truthful, relevant. The underlying concept of the inquiry is the notion of fundamental ambidirectional interoperability of the natural language systems with digital communication media, tools, and ambience within the integrated frameworks of human-human, human-machine, and machine-machine interaction. The digital dimension of communicative interoperability of the natural language stems from the structure of noosphere and content of its components, anthroposphere, sociosphere, and technosphere. The computer being, or the technogenic or cyber reality, a component of the technosphere of existence, is considered for the purposes of this research to be a complex multidimensional sphere of synthesis of reality, human experience, and activity mediated by the latest digital information technologies. Linguistic sphere is a parcel of the technosphere shift in comprehensive human activity. As such, cyber logosphere as a complex object and science system dominated by concepts of electronic interaction and communication acquires the following features: ubiquity, ontocentricity, integrativity, isomorphism, normativity, communicative sustainability, information capacity, interactive framework metastatus. Through the combination of these features, cyber logosphere is tangent to the complex systems of outlook and cognitive activity, such as model of the world, semiotic worldview, noosphere, and communication. The study empirical procedures were carried out with a set of digital language processing tools: the CORPUS tool, Sketch Engine, the lexicographic tool, LEXONOMY, and the ideographic tool, EMOJI-MAKER platform. Taking into account the specifics of the use of hieroglyphic and iconic script in digital communication, an empirical experiment was conducted with a method of transformation of hieroglyphic and iconic signs, the denotation of which is the sun. The results of the experiment allowed to fractalize the meaning scheme as a complex implicative statement in which the deductivization of the sign explains its main tiers: the ontological denotatum, the conceptual denotatum, and the lingual denotatum, which provided for the formalization of the content plane in the digital transformation of the expression plane. The sensory perception are the foundation of physicalistic perception and empirical comprehension of these sensations with the help of sensory speech cortex and kinetic motor verbal analyzer of proprioceptive information processing. Synthesized in the process of their properties, both zones generate phonological and syntactic codification, the visualization of which will be individual. To study and conclude the latter, we use the term qualia, which is introduced into analytical philosophy to denotate the most common thing, how things look to us. Qualia, thus, is a property of sensory experience. The functionality of qualia is explained by the example of a red apple. It is, in this case, the qualia is redness, not the apple itself or its properties. According to the above scheme on the slide, we observe a correlation between denotation, concept, and sign, which demonstrates the dependence of the sign on both objective existing reality and subjective perception of reality. Given that mentality is a codifier of human consciousness, it is worthy to ask a question: what is the mentality of a modern digital sphere, which operating with the traditional logical and linguistic properties determines computer being? A new sign, an innovative sign in computer being, is a type of a cybermorphism, the assimilation of an object and or a phenomenon of non-computer environment to an element of computer being on the basis of substantive and substantive features. Therefore, we consider it necessary to nominate the phenomenon of emoji as the emoji logos, which means the digital cache of linguistic cybermorphisms and extra-linguistic textures projected on it, which includes the duality of the knowledge and the duality of the knowledge perception, the ratio and emotio, facilitating the logical emotional basis of human thinking by means of coding of computer being by algorithm of artificial intelligence. The emoji logos transgresses from a sign, an emoji symbol, to a code or a text, and vice versa. The latter will allow us to study digital language science in synthesis with various natural and artificial empirical or essential data, given that such digital modal is nonlinear. The synthesis of a natural and artificial languages, ratio and emotio, transgresses the meaning of the code into a semiotic information concept of language and its reproduction by the dichotomy of man-machine. This can be demonstrated by the model by Melnikov that is correlated to the concept of the communicative arc. In the semantization of emoji logos in the dichotomy of man-machine, by analogy with the communicative arc, we take into account both the usual and the occasional meanings. By the latter, we mean, first of all, the mental characteristics of the visualization and systematization of the sign, which form a model for the appropriate expression of the individual features. The hieroglyphic sign, or rather its semantization, is the most striking example of the synthesis of the usual and occasional meanings of the human-machine dichotomy, where the sign is essential and immanent image of the denotation. Let's pay attention to the scheme on the slide. This is a scheme of the hypothesis of the mirror physicalistic reproduction of the form and content of the sign, where the hieroglyphic sign is taken as an example, which is an immanent example of a logical cognitive whole of a sign, and the emoji sign is the pictographic image of the sun proper. A retrospective feature of the concept of the sun reproduces its mirror image. By accepting the transformed experiment of empirical observation, we explain the iconographic image of the sun. The mechanism, the iconic image of the sun are monolithic. This confirms our statement about the synthesis of usual and occasional meanings. Occasional in this case is the rectangular shape of the character, the sun. Its perception is a completely usual generic shape reproduced by the net general standards, a yellow circle with little rays. We conclude that the hieroglyph sun, which is a square shape or rectangular shape in itself, is thus underlyingly motivated by the symbolic representation of the sun's illumination of the entire earth within 4 rising points: west, the dawn, the day, the night, the north, south, east, or west. In computer being, it is observed that the semantization of the concept of the sun with the help of the qualification and pictographic generation of the sign, where the perception in turn will be identical to the occasional hieroglyph. And this perception is provided due to the sign's usuality and associativity. The square is a physicalist perception of the proprioceptive information. By analogy, we cannot sensory feel the shape of the sun, but we can visually perceive the shape of its shadow on the earth, and the shadow has a rectangular shape. This is achieved with the help of an ancient astronomical instrument, the gnomon. This is on the slide. Consequently, in the physicalist perception, the qualia of the circle, the sun, is a rectangular figure. Under all these conditions, a logical sequence of the mirror reflection of the concept of the sun was generated. Such a transgression of the sign in computer being can be considered the mirroring, the circle to the square and vice versa, where the sign is an immanent image of a denotatum, and the circle is an image of a sign. Under such conditions, the communicative act in the computer being is considered complete because the pictographic and iconic image of the concept does not adiaphorize the usual meaning of the sun. We can fractalize the above scheme as a complex implicative statement in which the deductivization of the sign explains its main tiers. Consequently, level 1, the ontological denotatum, corresponds to the parametric feature of existential dimension. Level 2, the conceptual denotation, to the parametric feature of concept, and level 3, lingual denotatum, to the parametric feature of linguistic unit, or a logos in this case. We were able, within this study, to trace the functionality of the polylaterality of hieroglyphic and iconic signs at the structural level, which is in particular permitted us to further explicate the main tiers of the sign: ontological, conceptual, and linguistic denotative. However, the identification of non-linguistic sign in a fractalized form is impossible. The sign becomes an active functional only if all the necessary elements are present in the synthesis. Verification of the previous statement is possible under the condition of digital adaptation of hieroglyphic and iconic signs. So we trace the content plane in the digital transformation of the expression plane using the system of logs via the corpus management and text mining tool, SketchNG. It is observed that in the logs, hieroglyphic writing is reproduced by the plane of content and the plane of expression on two levels: hieroglyphic script and non-hieroglyphic script, which refers to the full reflection of the multi-vector character of the hieroglyphic sign, thus synthesizing all steps and transgressing into the microstructure of the logos content plane. It can be concluded that the system of logs visualized the surjective identification of the hieroglyphic sign, where the elements of the sign of the syllabic alphabet are associatively augmented by the specifics of the hieroglyphics. On the contrary, an emoji sign in SketchNG logs do not reproduce their structure either in terms of content or in terms of expression, which appeals to the conclusion of a specific algorithm for generating emoji, where the mental codifier is Unicode, which is the substrate for sign iconicity. Actually, according to the possibilities of formal reproduction in the digital corpus in computer being, we differentiate hieroglyphic and iconic signs accordingly. It is worth noting the synergy potential for another type of software, LEXONOMY. LEXONOMY is a cloud-based dictionary assembly system, and LEXONOMY is already integrated in the SketchNG. The SketchNG and corpus data can be fed to the lexicographic data of LEXONOMY to create automatically generated dictionary draft. And due to the interaction of these systems, it was possible to annotate and pre-program the corpus recognition of emoji language at the structural level. You can see it on the slide. We conclude that you can annotate the iconographic glossary to individual texts, upload data to the appropriate corpus, thus clarifying the operation of the program. Given the substantive characteristics of innovative units in the logosphere of computer being, their phenomenological specificity allows us to determine the correlative features of the logos as a single sign and the logos as an invariant or prescriptive text, more broadly a multimodal, multi-vector, or polylateral text. Substantive characteristics of innovative units of the logosphere of computer being allow to determine the phenomenological nature of all tiers of a language system. The above model is confirmed by the example of the generation of emoji sign. We took as a basis the science of the alternative model of digital presentation of fiction created with the help of the EMOJI-MAKER platform and tested by in-training linguistics students. And the attempt was made to compile the image of a lyrical hero in the EMOJI-MAKER platform. The created images, the so-called hieroglyphs of the 21st century, reproduce the multimodal concept of the metalinguistic plane. Computer being enables the multifunctionality and multimodality of the anthroposphere as a set of subjects of computer being, their activities, and socio-cultural heritage. The substrate for accommodation of signs is hieroglyphic and iconic signs, which in turn are the semioses of the pictographic image. However, we conclude that there is a differentiation in the algorithm for recognizing hieroglyphic and iconic characters of computer being. Hieroglyphic script is subject to absolute transgression in computer being in the codification of the system of logs, thus fractalizing the plane of expression and the plane of content, both at the level of hieroglyphics and at the level of non-hieroglyphic signs. The combination of two cloud corpus systems made it possible to fractalize the content plane and the expression plane of the pictographic emoji language system to facilitate occasional sense recognition and decoding in text and to provide a sustainable basis for automated corpus annotation, natural language processing, and eventually machine learning. Thank you for your attention.